Thank you for making me a part of your Saturday evening or Saturday morning or whatever it is according to your time zone. It is 11 p.m. on Saturday evening. I am here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. And tonight we are going to have a conversation. It'll be a Saturday night chat, what we normally do. And I do have some super chats left over from last night. I've got them written down right here on this piece of paper. So if you super chatted me last night and were not able to get an answer before I was cut off, you will get an answer tonight. So have no fear. But if you have another question and you want to super chat me, by all means, do that as well. The format we generally use here, for those who might be new, is I give my opening remarks. And then from there, we do our roll call, where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. We keep track of who this community is. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions until we're done. And I am sitting here. I've got plenty of unnamed water beverage, H2O, they call it, sitting here with me. And I have got a pen to write down your super chat questions, and I have got plenty of things to talk about. So it's going to be a great show this evening. So be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to post this on your Facebook, post this on Reddit, post this on, wherever, Bunker Chan, 4chan, Rockfin, whatever you post this on, be sure to do that. Make this a bigger conversation. The more people here, the merrier. Always good to talk to everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Always a pleasure. The more people here, the better. People do get unsubscribed, and they email me, oh my God, they unsubscribed me. So be sure to do it. People message me, I'm not getting notifications. What's the problem? So be sure to hit the notifications bell so you get notifications. The more people here, the more fun we have. It's a better show with more people. So yeah, I've got some opening remarks to take care of, to just update you all on a few things that are happening in the world. Then we'll do our roll call, and then I will answer your super chat questions, including the ones left over from last night when I was rudely interrupted by the world. So first things first, in my opening remarks, the Houthis, the Yemeni revolutionaries, the people of Yemen that are fighting to resist Saudi Arabia's onslaught. They've been fighting since 2015, but really since before that. Ecuador elections. All right. The Houthis are undesignated as terrorists by the United States. Just before he left office, Mike Pompeo, on behalf of the Trump administration, declared Ansarullah, the Houthis, to be terrorists. He designated them as a foreign terrorist organization. Biden has lifted that designation. So the Houthis they were not terrorists until about a week ago, and now, about 2 weeks ago, and now 2 weeks later, they are back to being not terrorists. How's the missus? I can answer that question. They are back to being not terrorists. So there you go. Now, what is this about? Well, we heard Joe Biden. He was supposed to give his first foreign policy speech on Tuesday, his first foreign policy speech. It was delayed because of the snowstorm, so he gave his first foreign policy speech on Thursday. And the speech, I will say, Joe Biden at the State Department, it was pretty nothing. It was a pretty big nothing burger, to quote Van Jones. Not much there. But in the little that Joe Biden did say, America is back. America is back. Diplomacy is back. He's doesn't like Russia and America should support LGBT rights. He didn't really say much. Sorry, spring allergies. He didn't really say much. But what he did say was, he said, the United States will end the war in Yemen. He said the USA will end the war in Yemen. And he said that the USA would stop providing offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia. However, it would continue to help Saudi Arabia to, quote, defend itself. So Biden seems to have understood and come to the understanding that the people of Yemen are not going to surrender. Let me repeat that. The people of Yemen are not going to surrender. In 2015, Saudi Arabia launched its onslaught against Yemen, and the people of Yemen have been fighting back and resisting. And the neocons want you to believe this is all just a big conspiracy from Iran. Well, they've got a tight blockade around Yemen, so it's very, very, very difficult for weapons or any supplies or support from Iran to get into Yemen. On top of that, if this was simply an Iranian conspiracy, it would have been over a long time ago. I mean, seriously. Saudi Arabia has the fourth largest military budget of any country in the world. They had Pentagon generals in Riyadh advising them. They had U.S. military satellites providing them satellite support. They bombed hospitals. They bombed schools. They bombed civilians. And they have been relentless. They have committed human rights atrocities. They have created one of the biggest man-made humanitarian crises in history. The whole country in Yemen is pretty much at risk of malnutrition. And again, if there was not popular support, education versus entertainment, there was not popular support for the people of Yemen and their struggle for national liberation, this war would have immediately ended. And it seems that Joe Biden and his administration recognize that, and they want to conduct some kind of negotiation to, create a ceasefire and settle the war in Yemen. And in order to do that, they've had to undesignate the Houthis as terrorists. You can't negotiate with terrorists. You can't do business with terrorists, right? If you are a designated FTO, foreign terrorist organization, the U.S. government is basically, unable to deal with you in any way. So the fact that he undesignated Ansar Allah as terrorists, that's a big step. And it indicates that the Joe Biden folks, they realize that Yemen's not going to surrender. They're going to keep fighting for their national liberation. So it was best to make some kind of deal before they lose everything. So I wanted to update you all on that. Now, I also wanted to mention that Russia is kicking ass with their vaccine. I hate to be crass and use street language with you all, but Russia is doing amazingly well. Countries all over the world are getting Russia's vaccine. It's in high demand. I recommend some works on dialectical logic and dialectical thinking in practice. Okay. Logic. Are you scared of Prince Charles and his Malthusianism? Malthusianism. Alrighty. So, Russia's vaccine is doing very, very well. It has a high success rate. It is very popular around the world. Country after country is signing up to get, the Sputnik V, the Russian vaccine. Meanwhile, if you look at our vaccine here in the United States, thank goodness COVID cases are down. That's a good thing. They're going to open up restaurants here in New York City on February 14th, according to the reports. But, they've done a miserable job. 20 million vaccines missing. Yeah, it's a little bit of a nightmare. That's something that is certainly a point of frustration. People are looking at the Biden administration and their promises that they had a plan, and they're saying, well, what in the world is going on here? Now, it's good that infections are finally down. And they say this is really just we're finally overcoming the holiday, spike. And then they're talking about Super Bowl parties, right? And the fact that, that 1 in 4 Americans is planning to go to a Super Bowl party on Sunday, even though they're recommending people not do that. I'm not going to a Super Bowl party. I probably won't even watch the gosh darn Super Bowl. I'm not a sports guy, not a big sports fan, honestly. When I was a kid, I think the church youth group used to have a Super Bowl party. When I was in college, I didn't pay any attention. And then when I was a political activist, there was this, there was, there was somebody in the political group I was in who would have a Super Bowl party. So I would go. It was just kind of a friendly gesture. But yeah, I mean, the Super Bowl is happening. And this year, it seems like, they're encouraging people to stay home, from the Super Bowl. How do we break the spell that Trump derangement syndrome has left on the left and focus on, all right, break Trump derangement spell. So, there you go. Now, another important bit of news that people may not be aware of. CGTN, which is Chinese news, has been banned from the airwaves of the United Kingdom. They've had their license pulled by Ofcom, which is the regulating agency of the British airwaves. CGTN is no longer on the air in Britain, and that is certainly a chilling precedent. That's pretty big to have their license pulled. CGTN, and that, this is the age of censorship. If you look at all the channels that are being demonetized, if you look at all the people that are being banned from social media right now, you look at all of this, we are living in an era of censorship. The people are angry. The people want justice. The means of information, technology are greater than they've ever been in history by far, and information is right there at your fingertips, and the people are in an angry fighting mood. And so there is an effort on the part of the ruling class and the Silicon Valley elites, the Silicon Valley fascists, to try and silence people. And it seems that the big step, the latest step is in Britain. CGTN is no longer on the airwaves. And that is an outrage, if in Britain they can have France 24, if in Britain they can have, CNN, why can't they also have CGTN, right? The targeting of anti-imperialist countries and their media because it dares challenge the prevailing narrative that the Western imperialists promote is deeply unsettling. They say they want competing narratives. They say they want an open society, but look what they are doing. The hypocrisy is very, very, very extreme. Now, I haven't followed exactly what happened with Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs is a longtime anti-immigrant bigot and not a good fellow in my view, but now he's been dropped by Fox News, and so there's a whole controversy surrounding that. I don't know exactly what's going on there. I do know that Tucker Carlson, who's a Fox News host, who's very right-wing and says many things I vehemently disagree with, he has had Jimmy Dore on, and he has had Max Blumenthal on. He had my friend Dakota Lilly on to talk about Venezuela. And, and that Tucker Carlson seems to be, of all the hosts at Fox, probably the one who's the most open to an anti-imperialist perspective. And because of that, it makes me concerned to see, what's going on at Fox. But then again, I've never been a fan of Lou Dobbs. I mean, for years, Lou Dobbs has been despicable. I mean, he was with CNN long before he was at Fox, and he is a despicable person in my view. I'm not a fan of his. Now, one little bit of information I thought might be sharing with you all is that for those of you who didn't know, I was on the Convo Couch, which is a great internet show. It's on YouTube and now on Rockfin. Just a great progressive internet show. They had me on Friday. Great segment. We talked for an hour about Marxism and socialism, and it was just a really, really great segment that we did. And it was about 40 minutes, I guess, and or 50 minutes maybe. And it was great. And one thing that was amusing, someone pointed this out. That apparently Kamala Harris was live streaming at the same time the Convo Couch was on, right? She was live streaming on Yahoo Finance to talk about the new Secretary of Treasury. Since it's Super Bowl Sunday, any thoughts on Tom Brady using his PPP to buy a yacht? All right. Brady buying a yacht. So I thought I might want to mention that what's certainly amusing is that the same time I was on Convo Couch engaging with them about socialism, Kamala Harris was live on Yahoo Finance. Um, and we were streaming at the same time, very same time. And 443 people were watching me on Convo Couch, and 216 were watching Kamala Harris on Yahoo Finance. So more people were watching me on Convo Couch than were watching the Vice President of the United States. I think that is very, very hilarious, right? Very, very hilarious. And it shows that as much as they try to push Kamala Harris, people really are not interested in Kamala Harris. They're not. I mean, people are really not interested in Kamala Harris. I pointed this out. I shared the screenshot that somebody made. And someone said, well, Caleb, you probably would have gotten more delegates in the Democratic primary. And that's funny because, I mean, Kamala Harris got barely any votes in the national election. But what's also funny about it is, that I mean, when it really gets down to it, I mean, a lot of people got more votes than Kamala Harris did in the Democratic National. I mean, it just shows they have worked so hard to push Kamala Harris on us. She could very well be president soon. When Joe decides he's tired and he wants to, move on, Joe Biden very well could step down and Kamala Harris could easily replace him. And nobody likes her. I mean, Kamala Harris, I mean, they're trying their hardest to build a cult of personality around her, but people find her to be not too good. I wrote a book about her, which has been widely reviewed, and it's widely appreciated as one of my better works. I wrote a book using Kamala Harris to try and analyze where left-wing politics is going. I used her life and her career to try to make some political points. I dug into who she is. I dug into the Hillary Clinton State Department. I dug into why Tulsi Gabbard and her clashed. And people liked that book. So, yeah, there you go. I just thought I would mention that. I was a little bit tickled by the fact that more people were watching me than were watching Kamala Harris. But overall, folks, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. Look, our community has greatly expanded in the last year. The amount of people watching these streams and broadcasts is far higher than it was a year ago, than it was 6 months ago. Our community is really, really growing. It is expanding. People really want to hear what we have to say. And I'm very happy about that. I really could not be happier to see our community grow and expand, to see more people that are interested in fighting for a government of action that fights for working families. The left has gotten crazy. The woke crowd, the destructive, toxic politics, the crazy right-wing libertarian stuff. We have an alternative here on this channel, drawing from Marx and Lenin, from William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and Eugene Debs, from the history of the Black Panthers, from others. We are offering progressive, constructive, anti-imperialist socialism. And we have something very, very special and unique. And, what we have here is something you won't find elsewhere, right? I mean, the analysis that we have is not widely available. And on here, I talk with you all about all kinds of things. I talk about, I've got super chats on here. We're going to talk about world history and philosophy. And a lot of what I do here is just answer your questions. And I try to give you a good answer to every question you ask. So what we've got here is very, very special. Now, the reason before we get to the roll call, I frequently get messages from people who want to help out, people who want to help build this community. They want to help the Center for Political Innovation. They want to help this political message. And they say, what can I do? What can I do? So I actually have a list of things that people can do if they want to help out. But before I get to that, I do want to mention that it is only a matter of time before the CPI Educational Manual, the Center for Political Innovation Educational Manual, is available. It will be available online, and it is basically written as an educational piece. It is a thing, it is a book that will give you everything you need to know about socialism. And that is going to be up very, very soon online. I sent it to the layout guy last night. He's been messaging me all day with questions about the layout. He should be done with it very shortly. We've got a beautiful cover. The book is good to go, basically. I get it back from the layout guy. I go over it one more time. Boom. And at that point, we've got something great. And based on that, as people are asking, how can I help out? How can I help this community? I have a few things that you can do. I'm not demanding that people do these things, obviously. I'm not trying to guilt trip you into doing these things. I mean, if you want to help out, if you genuinely want to help out with this community, these are things that you can do, and you can do them right now. You don't need me. You don't really need me to do them. Number one, you can write reviews of the books that we have, put together. The book on Kamala Harris, the Green Book by Gaddafi, City Builders and Vandals. You can write reviews of them on Amazon or on Goodreads. Goodreads is a very important website, goodreads.com. You're going to go and write some reviews, right? If you liked what I had to say, go and let the world know about it. Write reviews about it. So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing that you can do is cut clips. Cut clips. Right? People are doing this. This is great. There's a guy, I can't remember the name of his YouTube channel, but he's been doing reaction videos. He's a fan of the work that we do here. I've noticed this in the last couple days. He's been taking video clips from this YouTube channel, and he's been, filming his reaction to them. And he put up my debate with Vosh. He put up, some of my other videos about Jimmy Dore and about what imperialism really means. And it's great. It's great stuff. So, and other people, there's a channel called And Remember that has been cutting clips. Go ahead and cut clips. Do it. Go ahead. It's very, very appreciated. I think, Parasocialite, that's the name. That's the name of the guy who did that. It's great. I love it, And more people need to do that kind of thing. If you want to support what we're doing here, I'm not going to sue you. You don't have to ask my permission to cut clips. Just go ahead and cut clips, right? We need content on more than one channel. So, if by all means, if you like something that we do here, if there's a part of these broadcasts that you find to be very inspiring, cut the clip, post it on your own channel. By all means, do that. I think that's a great thing to do. Great, important thing to do. Now, another thing that you can do is start a reading group. Now, this is important, right? Because now we've already got a number of books available, and we're about to have the textbook, the educational manual is about to be available. Get 2 or 3 of your friends who live in your area, and you can have a gathering of 2 or 3 people, that's allowed, and get together and read the book. Or get on Zoom, start a Zoom reading group, right? And, tweet out, hey, anyone who wants to discuss Kamala Harris and the future of America, or City Builders and Vandals, or Getting Rich Without Capitalism, join me on Zoom for a book discussion. And people will join you, right? I mean, there's enough of us out there. Start a Zoom book discussion, right? And who knows, maybe you want to post the video on your YouTube channel. That'd be fine too. That would be great. Also, Reddit. Reddit is a website that there's a lot of discussion of what we do on here. There's a lot of discussion of our community and these broadcasts on here. I swear there are some people on Reddit who do nothing but watch these broadcasts. There's also a lot of shit talking, I should say, on Reddit. There's a lot of haters on Reddit. The standard thing that I'm actually a white supremacist, and I'm actually a racist Euro settler because I don't want all Americans to be poor. And, we need defense of this community on Reddit. So get on Reddit, by all means, defend this community. Because keep in mind, right, the stuff, the attacks are generally, directed at me personally. But it's really an attack on you, right? I mean, if I'm this evil person, then you must be evil for sitting here and watching me. All the thousands of people who watch these lives must be evil because you watch me and you think that I have a legitimate point. So when they're attacking me personally, they're really attacking you, right? And the things they say are so outrageous. I mean, we've seen what the smears are. I don't need to reiterate what the smears are. But they're so over the top and ridiculous. They are so nuts. And anyone who just listens to us, just listens to what we say on here, for half a second knows it's not true. So Reddit support, that is something you can do from anywhere you are. Get on Reddit, see what they're saying, use the search thing to see what they're saying about this community. Get in there and don't let them get away with it. And there have been some people, I have no idea who these folks are, but they have been tough, and they have done it. And it's been kind of amazing to read on Reddit, where there's people who stick in there and they won't let this settlers crap pass. They won't let this he's a Nazbol Strauss. They won't let it pass. Good for you guys. Good for you guys. Keep it up. And there's people who don't agree with me, and they said, "Look, I don't agree with Caleb on this, but these allegations are ridiculous. Come on." And that's great. I mean, I love what you're doing. So that's something you can do. Another thing you can do, make a video review. If you like one of the books that the Center for Political Innovation puts out, one thing you can do is you can make a video review of it. Get your copy and say, "Hey, I just got a copy of this book." Read from it. Talk about what you liked about the book. Again, I'm not going to sue you. You're allowed, if you have a copy of the book, by all means, just talk about it. Right? Go right ahead. That'd be great. Make a video review. And I will say a video review might actually be more respected. More people might watch it than they would watch a written review, unfortunately. You know how it is. People don't read, but everyone likes to have somebody talk to them. So maybe consider filming yourself. Make a 1 or 2 minute, or maybe 3 to 5 minute, or maybe even 10-minute video review of one of the books that we do, or a reaction video to a video that we do on here. Another thing that you can do, and people have been doing this, and it makes me a little bit, it makes me smile. People have been, people, they find a show, and you don't have to ask me. I mean, if there's a show you think I should be on, right? Just start getting the attention of the hosts, right? I mean, I would never have gotten invited on Convo Couch if people hadn't been going after Convo Couch and saying, have Caleb on. Well, they did. They loved me. They say I'm going to be back soon. Great. People have been after Jimmy Dore for how long? Like years. People have been demanding Jimmy Dore have me on there. That has almost taken on a life of its own. I love Jimmy Dore, and I love his stuff. And I know that, he thinks highly of me, and his fans think highly of me. I'm glad that people are continuing to keep that flame alive. There's no reason to be mean to him now. Don't go hostile. I'm sure he means what he says. He says that I'm eventually going to be on the show, and I'm sure he means that. So, there's no reason to get, angry or anything like that. But, keep up the flame alive. And, people have been tweeting at, right-wingers. They want them to debate me. People want me to debate this right-wing fellow. I forget his name now. He has the YouTube channel, former police officer. That's certainly something. I mean, and, if you want to let other internet communities that you're aware of be aware of what we do here, that would be great. Dialectical theory clumped in with Alex Jones. Dialectical theory clumped in with Jones. Alrighty. So that's something that you can do. Another thing you can do, get in touch if you are 18 or you're 15 to 18 years old and you want to be involved in some socialist activism. Get involved with Students and Youth for a New America. I am not involved with that organization. I'm not young enough. I'm 33. Does that make me a youth? I don't know. I'm 33 years old, but if you were 15 to 25, Students and Youth for a New America is an activist group. They are in Illinois. They're on college campuses in Illinois. They're on college campuses in high school campuses in the D.C. area and Beltway. They've got activism going on. They are doing great stuff. And, Dakota Lilly, who was with them at New School University, he appeared on Fox News a few years back to talk about Venezuela. Students and Youth for a New America is a great activist group, and they are doing stuff. So, get involved with them. And they are very much take inspiration from what we do here on this channel. And, they walk hand in hand with the think tank, the Center for Political Innovation. So if you're, 15 to 25 and you want to get involved in an activist youth group, by all means, contact the folks at Students and Youth for a New America. That would be a good thing to do. Gavin Lockhart, is one of their representatives out of Illinois. There's Max, he's in D.C. And there are people in Florida who now want to set up a wing of the group. There are people in different parts of the country. So by all means, get in touch with them. They are a patriotic socialist group. They're not nationalists. They reject American nationalism. They would never advocate nationalism or national chauvinism, but they put forward a constructive, patriotic, socialist message. Great folks. Dust James. Shout out to Dust James. He did an interview with them, and he does great stuff. I mean, there's great channels that have kind of sprung up, and so Dust James is doing great stuff. David Fox is doing great stuff in Australia. So be involved in that. The other thing that you can do, and I've mentioned this before, but I'll throw it out there again, is that the Center for Political Innovation, CPI, we've been having our monthly web conferences that are streamed on this channel. Last one, we had speakers from Iran, and we had David Rovics, the folk musician, play for us. That was great. I mean, the performance, he played Failed State. That was great. He did a song about Jared Kushner. I mean, it was great stuff. We had speakers from Iran who gave a presentation about the Iranian Revolution. We had activist reports, and if you want to be involved with the Center for Political Innovation, by all means, shoot me an email. First name, last name, no spaces or anything, at gmail.com, and I can plug you in. Every Saturday, we have a Zoom call. We had one today. Good number of folks on there to talk about. We talked about the manual. We talked about this month's web conference, what it's going to be like. So by all means, you can get involved with the CPI. The last thing you can do if you want to help this community, and I'm sure there are more things I will think of. I'm sure this is not the first time I'll give you a list of things you can do. The last thing you can do if you want to help this community, the last thing that you can do is be prepared to travel post-COVID. Once the restrictions are started to be lifted, once the pandemic is no longer restricting people's ability, we're going to start doing stuff around the country. We have a plan, and I don't want to get into too many specifics about it. I have pitched it to a number of people. We have a plan for building an effective socialist education think tank. And the Center for Political Innovation, CPI, we have a plan for spreading this unique, constructive socialist message across the United States. So if you want to help out, be prepared post-pandemic to swing into action. Swing into action. Look, folks, I know there are a lot of folks who listen to this who, you got a wife and you got kids and you got a job you got to get to every day to feed that wife and kids, or feed that husband and kids, or, that's a different situation. But there's a lot of people who watch this who are young, right? And I mean, and I'm young, relatively young. I'm 33, but, there are a lot of people who watch this who are, late teens, early 20s, post-pandemic, there will be definitely some real opportunities for you to make a contribution in real life. We want to form an outreach team for the Center for Political Innovation that will go from city to city, basically. We'll set up shop in one city to do outreach and build for a big political conference in that city, and then we'll go to another city. And we want to form an outreach team that will set up shop in a city. And we will have sustained operations where we're able to fund and continue to do what we're doing. We'll have sustained operations in a city for a while, then we'll have another city, and we are going to get from coast to coast, different parts of this country, building the Center for Political Innovation. I've got people who have done this professionally. I've got professional event organizers that I have spoken with who are ready to organize great events in different cities that we can build with our outreach team. I have spoken with people that have done professional, canvassing and outreach, that are ready to organize the outreach teams. On top of that, a lot of great things are in the works. I have drawn up a business model for the Center for Political Innovation of how we can build this constructive socialist movement, and how in every corner of this country where people are desperate for a way out of the nightmare of capitalism, we can be there to offer the message, the revolutionary message that we have here. And so I'm very excited. So the last thing you can do if you want to help this community is be prepared to travel post-pandemic, especially if you're somebody who's, if you're young, if you're not in a situation where you have a huge amount of commitments, and you're ready to. I did hear that CPUSA is accused of insurrection, and that was a super chat last night, and I'm actually going to talk a lot about that. I have a lot to say about that, so thank you for that super chat. It's already on the list of things to talk about. Don't worry. But yeah, we are going to swing into action because there is so much work that needs to be done. We have a solid plan, and so if you are somebody who is ready to travel, by all means, post pandemic, please let me know that you're ready to go, folks. I mean, some of the best years of my life. I'll just be honest. I remember when I lived in a basement with four other people. Four other people. I lived in a basement in Queens, and me and four other roommates, two women, two men, and all five of us. We rented this basement in the middle of Queens, and we lived in tight conditions, but it was revolution every day. I mean, we gave the whole of our lives to the revolution. It was a group of people, and we went to every demonstration and protest, and we did some amazing stuff. One thing that we did, which is I am proud of this, is that when the movie Red Dawn came out, which was this movie. It was a remake of a movie from the 80s. In the 80s, they made this awful movie about like the Soviet Union and Cuba invading the United States. And it was this right-wing propaganda film. So they remade it a few years back, and they remade it to be about North Korea invading the United States. It was really supposed to be China, and then they realized they couldn't show it in China. So they remade the movie to be about North Korea invading the United States. So after that, we protested on the first day that movie was shown at a movie theater in Times Square. We had a protest against the movie with North Korean flags. We protested against the movie Red Dawn. That was amazing, right? And the media, saw us there with the North Korean flags. We had signs that Kim Il-sung is a revolutionary hero. Wall Street imperialism controls Hollywood. And, it was like we were widely covered. It was like a big deal. And we did a couple of those demonstrations. When they made the movie Olympus Has Fallen, another anti-North Korean propaganda film, we protested that movie in Union Square. And we were in Union Square. We had pictures of Kim Il-sung. We had big North Korean flags. And, I mean, it was amazing. And the international impact of these demonstrations, you think, it was never a lot of people, right? I mean, how many people are going to march through the streets of New York City with the flag of North Korea and pictures of Kim Il-sung? Not many, right? And it was theater. We were being provocative, okay? We were being provocative, and thank you, Devani. We were just being provocative, right? I mean, that's what we were doing. How many people are going to do that, right? But one thing that happened, I will never forget this, is that, there was some news item about North Korea launched a missile. And so the Associated Press put out a story, I kid you not, a news story about North Korea with a picture of this young woman who was part of our activist group holding a North Korean flag. And that was the picture that went along with the story about news on the Korean Peninsula with the subtitle. It actually had the subtitle. The subtitle was North Korea Supporter in Manhattan. That was huge. And, the ruling class of the United States was kind of put on notice that in Manhattan, in New York City, there was a crew of, 20, 30 people who were not afraid to come out and wave the flag of North Korea. And that was huge. That was huge, right? It scared the ruling class. It scared the ruling class that we did that. And that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for me and the other four people I lived with. The political group I was in was not exactly thrilled about the way we were doing the organizing. They didn't like it. And then we were attacked by a lot of synthetic left forces. But look, you have to sometimes be provocative, right? And that's the thing, is that there's a balance. I am all for making socialism patriotic. I am all for making socialism not destructive. I'm all for not being in your face and hostile to people. But when, North Korea, we were facing the danger of a new war with North Korea. They're making propaganda films against North Korea. Sometimes you got to be provocative. Sometimes you got to be provocative. And so by being really in your face, it was street theater, basically. By being really in your face And by having the North Korean flags and having pictures of Kim Il Sung and having signs with like wild slogans on them, by doing that, we really grabbed the attention of a lot of people, and it kind of put the ruling class of the United States on notice that the opposition to any war that they might wage against North Korea might be far bigger, far bigger than they might expect. And, there's some people who said to me, why didn't you just have a rally for peace on the Korean Peninsula? Because it wouldn't have gotten the same reaction. Why didn't you just have a rally for, jobs, not war? Well, I'm all for peace on the Korean Peninsula. I'm all for jobs, not war, but it wouldn't have gotten the same reaction. We were there. It was a small demonstration. Never were there more than 20 people at these little rallies that me and my four comrades had. And, we had some older folks come with us, but never was there more people. But we had these hands-off North Korea demonstrations, big North Korean flags, big pictures of Kim Il-sung, and everybody walking by just went, it was big. And thank you, Ann, remember, for the super chat. I do appreciate it. And people were just shocked, and it just put people on notice that there was such sentiments, and those were good years. And I was young, I had been through college, I was here in New York, I barely had any money. But doing stuff like that, doing that kind of outreach, being out every day, selling the communist newspaper on the subway and in Union Square, building little, provocative little demonstrations like that, those were some of the best years. And I learned so much by just being out and engaging with people. Every day I was on the street talking to people. Ramiro remembers that and says, mad respect. Thanks, Ramiro. Yeah. Those were good years. And that is how you really learn. I would never have probably come to the conclusions that I've come to and, come to the understanding of what is wrong with the American communist and socialist movement without being out there in the streets, right? It's not just about going out there and getting people to agree with you. That's important, right? You're spreading the revolutionary message. You're bringing revolutionary politics to the masses. That's important when you do outreach. That's very important. However, it's also important that you hear what the people say and you hear the arguments of people who disagree with you. You hear where people are open to things, right? That in the Little Red Book by Mao Zedong, he talks about from the masses to the masses. From the masses to the masses, right? That it is a two-way conversation. You must hear what is on the minds of the masses in order to give them what they need. And that the best education that you can get. Look, in this manual that's about to come out, the educational manual, there's a whole, essay from Mao or a speech from Mao that I put in there where he's urging these communist philosophy students to go to the countryside and work with the peasantry. And why is he urging them to do that? Because you get an education by engaging with people. The truth and the reality is in the people. It's with the people that you can find the truth. And so, it is from the masses to the masses, engaging with the broad masses of people, hearing what they have to say, learning how they see things, engaging with them, leading while learning while leading, from the masses to the masses. It must be a two-way conversation. Communists can't just talk at the masses. They have to talk to the masses, and the masses have to talk back to them. That's super, super important. My hope is that folks that are not too attached and don't have too many commitments, that we can facilitate, in addition to the Center for Political Innovation's formal structures as we open the membership, in addition to that, we would like to create an outreach team that goes from city to city, and that we provide some housing. We obviously have to do some fundraising and such, but we create a situation where people can be involved in daily outreach efforts for the Center for Political Innovation. And we can kind of have a revolutionary community of activists who are ready to go out and spread the message and get CPI's unique understanding to the masses. And it's going to be important. Not only is it going to be important because of the fact that we need to do it and all of that, it's going to be important because we don't know how much longer we're going to be on the internet. They are messing up the internet like crazy right now. I'm on YouTube here, haven't been demonetized, haven't been taken down, but who knows how much longer we're going to be able to do stuff on the internet. So IRL outreach, in real life outreach, handing people leaflets, you can't do stuff like that now because of the pandemic. But as the restrictions are lifted, we are going to need to form, outreach teams. We are going to need to start having in real life meetups and events, and we are going to have to develop a core of people, like a cadre of people, a group of people that are willing to do this. And we have our CPI Zoom calls, we have our web conferences, but we are going to have to develop a cadre, a core of people that are willing to be, outreach folks and do outreach and professional outreach about socialism and build the Center for Political Innovation and build, the kind of socialism we need, and build socialism with American characteristics and get people to understand that we need a government of action to fight for working families, right? No one else is going to do it except us, right? No one else is going to do it except us. We have a job that needs to be done. The situation becomes more ripe every day. There is work that we must do. So I just wanted to let everyone be aware of that. So we have a lot of super chats to get through, super chats from last night and super chats from today. But I'm going to give you an answer to all of those super chats like I always do. So folks, why don't we do our roll call? Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you. Zach in Antarctica. Dallas, Texas. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Las Vegas. David in Chile, Bendigo, Australia, Legend, Shanghai, Belize, Joey, Jack Dundee in the United Kingdom, Michael in Ithaca, New York, Baltimore, Albany, New York, Missouri, Daniel from Los Angeles, Montreal, Cincinnati, Ohio, Jenny Lynn, Shaw from Maryland, Pasadena, California, Troy in Kansas City, Missouri, Gabriella from New Jersey, very good, Kieran from San Diego, Limerick, Ireland, Mo from Toronto, Niobium in Toronto, Nassau County, New York, welcome, Montana, Terre Haute, Indiana, the home of Eugene Debs, JT24, Mississippi, Alameda County, California, very good, Glasgow, Scotland, Jersey City, New Jersey, Oakland, Balthazar, Denver, Colorado, Pomona, California, West Palm Beach, Detroit, Baldwin Park, California, Seattle again, St. Louis, Missouri, Finland, very good, West Palm Beach, Auckland, New Zealand, Jack Dundee, Niagara Falls, and slowly I turned, and step by step, inch by inch, Little Falls, New Jersey, Ramiro in East LA, good friend of the program, West Palm Beach, Northern California, San Jose, Ann Remember in Dallas, Texas. That's where you are, Ann Remember. I should remember that. West Palm Beach, Benton Harbor, Michigan. Benton Harbor, wow. Torrance, California, Mohsen from Iran. Brazil, Ottawa, Canada, Northern Michigan. Mike in Windsor. Thoughts on the People's Party? I will write it down. People's Party. People's Party. Hey there, Detroit Party people. This is the People Party person, right? Party of Communists, California. Alrighty, Long Island, New York City. Very good. Austin and Wake Up Alex Jones. Okay, I don't know what that means. Brazil, Belo Horizonte. Knoxville, Tennessee. John in Houston. A lot of Texas folks on tonight. The Netherlands. Lake Elsinore, California. Joey, welcome. Kendall in San Diego. Helen in Melbourne loves the CPI. Well, we love you too, Helen. You are great. You should check out, folks should check out. Last week, Helen went on with Dust James and David Fox on their Working Class Revolt program. Had a great conversation about, running for office and getting the socialist message out to people in your community. Helen talked a lot about herself, so folks should check that out. She talked about her work, educating people and with the labor movement. Great stuff. So people should check that out. Alex Jones lives in Austin near Stratford. LOL. So, okay. Round the bend, says Richard. Joshua Tree, California. Kinky, welcome, Kinky. Glad you're here. Kinky's a longtime friend of the program. She remembers when there were 30 people watching this. Isn't that wild? LA. No one else, says Joey. Well, there you go. There you go. All right. West Philly. Anthony in West Philadelphia. Very, very, very good. West Philadelphia. All right. North Carolina, Dust James. New Jersey. Treasure Coast, Florida, Captain Waffles. Great stuff. Great stuff. There you go, folks. There you go. A lot of super chats to get through. But I've got plenty of water. So we're going to finish the super chats from last night. We got about 5 of them to get through. First super chat from last night that I wanted to talk about. I'm glad people raised it because I do have plenty to say about it. So CNN ran an article this week, and it was one of those articles. How do communists square off opposition to free speech and suppression with the necessity of socialist countries suppressing certain bourgeois free speech? All right. Free speech. Socialist countries. Alrighty. So, you know, the CNN, right? CNN, they ran an article. And it's, first of all, you can tell this was an article that it's not news. It is not news, okay? It's, you know, they got a group of academics together. And the academics said something. And then CNN did a story about it. The whole thing was created just to, like, you know, so it's like this new group of academics that was formed just to tell you this did a story and said that the Capitol riot that on January 6th was similar to something done by right-wingers in the past and also something done by the Communist Party. And that, you know, it was an act of insurrection. It was an attempted overthrow of the U.S. government. And it was similar to what the Communist Party did in 1945. And that is so utterly ridiculous if you read the article. And it's like horrifying that they can say this. In 1948, the National Board of the Communist Party USA was jailed for the crime of conspiring to teach the necessity of the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. It was the Smith Act. It was a U.S. law that made it a crime to teach or to conspire to teach any ideology that would necessitate the overthrow of the U.S. government. Will CPI be reaching out to any national and international workers' movements? Right. CPI reaching out. And folks, I actually have here, I have here, this is the book, Biden Ending Yemen War. This is the book that the Communist Party USA published, during that whole situation. It was one of many books. William Z. Foster wrote a very good pamphlet called In Defense of the Communist Party and Their Indicted Leaders. Very funny, David. This book, Ideas They Cannot Jail, by Eugene Dennis. William Z. Foster was the chairman of the Communist Party. Eugene Dennis was the general secretary. And this book is a compilation of the statements made by Eugene Dennis when the Communist Party was charged with the crime of conspiring to overthrow the U.S. government. Aware of the big impact that China-based Western YouTubers have had in reversing anti-China sentiment. Okay. YouTubers. Big impact. Alrighty. So what happened was, the Smith Act, which is was a law that was passed in 1940. It was worded in such a way that, like, it was basically just an anti-communist law that you couldn't advocate. It was written as you couldn't advocate the overthrow of the U.S. government or any ideology that might lead you possibly to that conclusion, and you couldn't conspire to teach such an ideology. It was the law itself was very strangely worded. But regardless, 1948, they charged the National Board of the Communist Party USA with conspiring to teach the overthrow of the U.S. government. Now, what the conspiracy was that in 1945, they had an emergency convention and refounded the Communist Party. The Communist Party had dissolved during the Second World War. Earl Browder changed it to the Communist Political Association. And the Communist Political Association, difference between Marxist and a socialist. Marxist. Socialist. Difference. Earl Browder, during the Second World War, he was the leader of the Communist Party, and he dissolved it. It became the Communist Political Association. And they did not preach Marxism-Leninism. They preached Marxist Jeffersonianism. After the Second World War was coming to an end, the rank and file of the Communist Party, William Z. Foster, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, others, they felt it was necessary for the Communist Party to be reformed. There was kind of an uprising in the membership. Earl Browder was kicked out of the party, and it was reestablished. Became the Communist Party once again. At their emergency convention, they refounded the Communist Party of the United States, 1945. When they refounded the Communist Party, their belief was that they wanted to reestablish a Communist Party based on Marxism-Leninism. So in 1948, the National Board of the Communist Party were arrested, and it was said that by establishing a party that wanted to preach Marxism-Leninism, that was a violation of the Smith Act, because that was teaching an ideology that might lead one to the conclusion that you needed the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. And so that has nothing to do with what happened on January 6th. There was never a situation where, communists were breaking into the Capitol building or anything like that. I mean, so I don't know how, the U.S. Department of Justice arresting and jailing 20 leaders of the Communist Party for the crime of supposedly, of getting together to form an organization that teaches an ideology that they claimed might lead one to the conclusion that one should violently overthrow the U.S. government, had nothing to do with what the right wing did. I mean, that is so ridiculous to make that equation. And that article should scare leftists, okay? The fact that they are trying to insert it into the public mind, that the Communist Party USA is the equivalent of QAnon. That is very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. CNN is not our friends, folks, and seeing leftists go along with the wave of internet censorship right now, look, they are very open about who they are coming for. And so, I thought, and the Communist Party was not guilty of the crime they were charged with. Right now, there have been some court rulings since then. In 1957, the Supreme Court ruled in the famous Yates versus the United States ruling that it was legal to be in the Communist Party as long as you didn't advocate the overthrow of the U.S. government. And then, 1969, you had the infamous, famous or infamous ruling Brandenburg versus Ohio. And that was 1969. I have to just tell this story. I've told it before, but so 1969, you had Charles Brandenburg, and he was in Ohio. I'm from Ohio, too, unfortunately. I'm in the same state as Charles Brandenburg. And Charles Brandenburg, he was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan of Ohio. And he, bought time on television. And in his televised speech, Charles Brandenburg called for acts of revengeance against members of Congress who voted for the Civil Rights Act. And of course, he was arrested immediately for doing that, because you can't, call for acts of violence against elected officials. Well, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, actually, that's okay, that he didn't call for anything specific. He just said this vague call for acts of revengeance, and the Supreme Court actually ruled in 1969 that it was okay for Charles Brandenburg to get up there and call on television for acts of revengeance against elected officials. So basically, at this point, it would be very hard to prosecute, the Communist Party the way they did in 1948. Now, there have been some new laws about terrorism that have been enforced, where they can say that someone's supporting terrorism by tweeting something, so it's complicated. But that Brandenburg versus Ohio ruling, it's pretty hard to say it's illegal to be a communist in the United States. But even in 1948, when the Communist Party of the United States was charged with teaching the violent overthrow of the U.S. government, they didn't. They didn't teach that. Communists do not advocate violence. Communists favor a peaceful transition to socialism, and they always have. And I will actually read to you, this is what the communists said when they were charged by the U.S. government, and they were convicted, for teaching the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. I'm going to read to you exactly what they said. This is from the Communist Party of the United States at a time when Stalin was leading the Soviet Union, when William C. Foster was in power, when Mao Zedong was sending them telegrams congratulating them. This was their position on whether or not they advocated the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. This is what they said. Despite all the fables and falsehoods, we communists do not advocate force and violence. As Marxists, we are opposed in principle to adventurism, terrorism, assassinations, conspiracies, and coups d'etat. As Marxists, we know that no social system, least of all the capitalist system, can be overthrown by a conspiracy or by a minority. As Lenin emphasized, the organization of a society can be changed only after it has outlived its usefulness. And it can be changed only when the human beings who live under that system find it no longer endurable and create a new social order. This always requires a majority of the new and rising class in the interests of the immense majority of the people, leading a struggle for social progress and basic change. Always and everywhere, it is the old and dying class which advocates and practices force and violence to preserve its obsolete rule. Thus did the British monarchists who set to put down the American mercantile class. Thus did the slaveocracy that sought to prevent the revolutionary rise of the industrial bourgeoisie. Thus did the monopoly capitalists turn to fascism and imperialist war in an equally vain attempt to halt the advance of the American working class and its popular allies and the social progress of the people. In exercising our right to defend the immediate and vital interests of the American people, we communists also exercise our inalienable right to advocate change, socialism. We do not advocate the forceful overthrow of the United States government, but we do uphold the principle on which this government was founded, the indefensible, indefeasible right of the people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We uphold the Declaration of Independence, which states, whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as them shall seem most likely to affect their happiness. I charge that monopoly capitalism and its state power are conspiring to destroy the life, liberty, and happiness of the American people. I charge that to this end, they are now seeking to nullify and overthrow the Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights. This, in brief outline, is the case we communists bring before the jury of our American working class peers. No matter how many Elizabeth Dillings and Elizabeth Bentleys reaction digs up from the dregs of capitalist society, no matter what espionage provocations and new frame-ups the bipartisan monopolists invent to bolster their miserable defense, we intend to press our indictment against the men of the trusts and make it stick. We remind the American people that those who tried to frame the German communists for Hitler's Reichstag fire were hanged for their crimes at Nuremberg. But before that happened, millions of lives were consumed in the hellfires of World War II. If the trade unions and other mass organizations of the American people pour their united wrath upon Truman's bipartisan Reichstag fire, they can put it out now. In the name of peace, democracy, and social progress, we communists call on labor and all progressive Americans to join with us in accomplishing this great task before it is too late. Damn. The Communist Party of the United States made clear, and I'll read to you just one sentence here, it's very important. Always and everywhere, it is the old and dying class which advocates and practices force and violence to preserve its obsolete rule. Did you hear that? Always and everywhere, it is the old and dying class which advocates and practices force and violence to preserve its obsolete rule. Communists never want or advocate a violent revolution. Always they favor a peaceful transition to socialism. It is the dying class, the ruling class, that organizes to move toward fascism, organizes police state repression. They are the ones that force violent revolutions to happen by not allowing the people to exercise their democratic rights, right? Communists are simply advocates of democracy, of the ability of the people to operate and organize, to transition and change to a more rational society. And if that is able to happen peacefully, that is what we want. However, it is very likely, and we know it is very, very likely that the capitalists would prefer to keep their wealth more than they love democracy. And that they are very likely, in the moment when the people are organizing, when there are broad organizations of the people in motion, it is very likely that the capitalists would resort to some kind of fascist coup or some kind of violent activity to suppress democracy. And when such a thing happens, the communists would do what Abraham Lincoln did when the slaveholders took up arms to try and preserve their slave system. And Abraham Lincoln organized the Second American Revolution to defeat the slaveholders, right? They did that. It was an act of self-defense in Spain when the fascists mobilized to overthrow the Spanish Republic. The communists organized self-defense for the Spanish Republic. In Russia, when the military of Russia and General Kornilov, mobilized his soldiers to try and seize control of St. Petersburg and suppress democracy and the right of the Soviets and workers' councils to organize, the people defended themselves. In China, at first, the communists they joined the KMT government of Chiang Kai-shek. Mao Zedong was even an alternate member of the National Committee of the KMT. But when the KMT started outlawing communists and persecuting communists, they fled to the countryside. And then, when Japan invaded China, Mao joined with the KMT and Chiang Kai-shek to defeat the Japanese invaders. And after World War II, Mao and the KMT tried to form a coalition government where there would be KMT representatives and communists. And the KMT refused to allow Mao and the Chinese Communist Party to participate in the elections, but didn't stop there. Then he started going to the areas where the communist army that had defeated the Japanese invaders, where they had set up, and trying to force this army that had defeated Japan to give up its weapons and surrender, even though they had been the ones to defeat Japan, and they were not being allowed to participate in the elections. And it was only when the KMT said that Mao couldn't participate in the elections, and furthermore, the KMT was trying to forcibly disarm the people who had resisted Japan and tell the Chinese communists who had defeated the Japanese invaders that they should surrender and hand over the areas that they had freed from the Japanese invaders, to Chiang Kai-shek. It was only then, when the ability to have a peaceful transition to socialism was cut off, it was only then that Mao, had a violent revolution and overthrew the KMT. So, if you look throughout history, there has never ever been a revolution, a communist revolution, that was carried out because communists went around saying, hey, everyone ought to be violent. Hey, let's be violent. And the people said, gee golly, they ought to be violent. And they were violent. That never happened. Never has that ever happened. Ever. The Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, everywhere. What has happened is the communists have organized peacefully, and their ability to organize peacefully has been met with violence and terror, and all of society has been threatened in response to the efforts of the people to try and organize, to change things. And as the ruling class, unleashes violence on the people, the communists organize the people to defend themselves. Revolutions are acts of self-defense. They are acts of self-defense. Every socialist revolution that has ever been successful has been an act of self-defense. It has been the people refusing to allow the violence and terror of the ruling class to pass. It has been people defending themselves. And as much as I prefer a peaceful transition to socialism, and I advocate a peaceful transition to socialism, I do not advocate violence. People do have the right to defend themselves, right? People don't have to just roll over and be killed, right? And if the ruling class of this country were to try and take away our ability to peacefully organize, try to outlaw our ability to peacefully organize, was try to threaten people's democratic rights. If there was a junta, right? If there was something like what happened, or something, if there was some section of the military that was coming to overthrow the elected government of the United States and set up a fascist regime, the American people would have the right to defend themselves. Right, the elected government of the country, the people's community organizations would have the right to defend themselves, and you can bet that communists would be part of that effort, just like communists were part of Lincoln's effort to defeat the slaveholders, just like communists were part of the effort to defend Roosevelt from the business plot. So we have to be very clear about this. Never did the Communist Party advocate violence. And when they this conspiracy that they're trying to link, that CNN is trying to link in their article to the events on January 6th, it was not a conspiracy to do anything but preach Marxism. It was not a conspiracy to do anything but exercise their democratic rights to preach the necessity of socialism. So, the fact that whatever this stupid academic think tank that was formed just for this CNN article said, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And the Supreme Court overturned their ruling. Eventually the Supreme Court in 1957, it said, yeah, preaching Marxism-Leninism is not the same as preaching violence, right? They changed their mind. They said, unless you yourself go around advocating violence, you can be a communist. 1957, I gave you the other summation. So that CNN article, it was such a disgusting effort to try and miseducate people and to try and equate communists with the far right. It was very, very dangerous. The reality is the people hate what happened on the Capitol. No one likes what happened on Capitol Hill. The whole country was disgusted by it. And so the ruling class is trying to equate people with it, right? Just like the synthetic left tries to equate communists with Nazis. Everybody hates Nazis. Oh, well then they try to equate communists with Nazis. No, Nelson Mandela was not a Nazi. No. Albert Einstein was not a Nazi. Nope. The people who built the Civil Rights Congress are not the same as the people who went around lynching black people. Langston Hughes, the beloved African-American poet, the people who wrote We Charge Genocide. Nope. You can't do it. Communists are not Nazis. They never have been. And, Vosh can say that over and over and over again, but he's an idiot. So there you go. I just wanted to address that. Another super chat from last night. Somebody asked me about the Fred Hampton movie. I haven't seen it. I don't think it's out yet. But the title is interesting. So this new movie that they've made about Fred Hampton, they called it Judas and the Black Messiah. Black Messiah, that refers to the FBI. The U.S. FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, one of the aims of the COINTELPRO program was to prevent the rise of a black messiah. That was the stated aim, to prevent the rise of a black messiah. The assassination of Fred Hampton, some people put the assassination of Martin Luther King, and others, that was the stated aim. So the phrase black messiah, that comes from J. Edgar Hoover. So that's what the movie is referring to. I haven't seen the movie. Obviously, I would assume Judas is somebody who betrays Fred Hampton or something, but I don't know. Sometimes you can always count on Hollywood to mess things up. But right now, because there's divisions in the ruling class, they make a good movie every so often. They made Free State of Jones. That was an amazing movie. I agreed with it politically 100%. Great movie. I wish it wasn't so gory and violent. I wish, but there were some beautiful scenes in Free State of Jones. That was a great movie, right? And it showed that the Confederacy was an abomination. It was worst for the enslaved people, of course. It was worst for them, but it was bad for poor white workers. And in Jones County, there's the white workers and black workers stood arm in arm and overthrew the Confederacy. It was a great movie. So who knows? Maybe this Fred Hampton movie will be another Free State of Jones, good movie, but you never know. You never know. Alrighty. Okay. Someone said, asked about about factions in the Chinese Communist Party. Look, there is probably not any official factions. I believe the Chinese Communist Party bans any official factions. But at the same time, there are disagreements. There are different viewpoints. Jiang Zemin eventually, at one point, in the 90s, he said the goal of China was to eventually adopt the Western system. You listen to President Xi Jinping, that is clearly not what they want to do anymore. So things change. Things change. There are different viewpoints. All right. Eritrea. Well, Eritrea, you know, you have to remember, so Eritrea was fighting for its independence from Ethiopia. Right? Ethiopia was run by Haile Selassie. He was the emperor, was a Christian African kingdom. You'll remember Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, and after, during World War II, the Ethiopian people fought against Mussolini and the Italian imperialists. After World War II, Haile Selassie once again became the emperor of Ethiopia. Haile Selassie was a free market U.S. dictator. Apologies to my Rastafarian friends, but Haile Selassie he was not a progressive, unfortunately. And so after the death of Haile Selassie, throughout the reign of Haile Selassie, the people of Eritrea were fighting for their independence. There were Marxist-Leninists in Eritrea that were fighting for their independence. After the death of Haile Selassie, the Derg came to power in Ethiopia. They were Marxist-Leninists. They were, pro-Soviet. So at that point, the Eritrean resistance split. The pro-Soviet Marxist-Leninist factions, they supported the Derg, and they just wanted regional autonomy under the Derg of Eritrea. However, the Maoists that were China-aligned, they continued to fight, and they called the Derg agents of Soviet social imperialism. Right? That was the ultra-left. That was the line of China, was that the Soviet Union was a new empire. And eventually Eritrea won its independence. So the government of Eritrea now is descended from the Maoists. It's descended from the factions in Eritrea that did not lay down their guns and support the Derg. That's where they came from. And the USA originally supported them, you have to remember. Chinese Social Sciences has an article, 7 Currents of Social Thoughts and Their Development in the Contemporary Focus, with a focus on innovative Marxism that is relevant. I'll have to check out that article. That sounds fascinating. I'll have to check that out. Thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. It sounds like a fascinating article. So the Eritrean government is descended from the Marxist-Leninist faction that was anti-Soviet, that was pro-Chinese. Now, they did get some CIA support as well. The United States supported them in fighting the Derg, right? The USA didn't like the Derg of Eritrea. They did not like Mengistu. So the CIA and China backed Eritrea. The current government of Eritrea, though, now Ethiopia, the Derg fell, and Ethiopia is back, as a U.S.-aligned country. Eritrea is much friendlier to Russia and China. And I don't know if the government of Eritrea still espouses Marxism-Leninism. I think that there's more of an Islamic influence there now, but I believe it is the same political party from that era, and it is friendlier to Russia and China. So that's the situation in Eritrea. All right. Socialist solutions to homelessness. Well, look, overall, making housing affordable to everyone is a basic right. The rate of home ownership in China and Cuba and socialist countries is very high. People think that socialism means no one owns anything. No one can have a home of their own. That's false. Maximizing home ownership is something that socialist countries do. I know in Cuba, after you've lived in a home for more than 2 or 3 years, it becomes your property, and that your rent can never be more than 10% of your income in Cuba. And in China, the government has done huge amounts to maximize home ownership. And that workers having the personal property of a home, right? That's not means of production. It's not something they're using to make profits off of someone's labor, but maximizing the right of the workers to own their own home is something that socialist governments have prioritized. Now, that said, in addition to the economic drive behind homelessness, there is an element of a lack of mental health services, right? There are some folks that are homeless because they have a mental health problem, and there need to be mental health services available to those folks. They shouldn't be forcibly hospitalized, but there should be, for folks that are homeless, not simply out of economic compulsion, but because of a mental health issue, there should be services available. And right now, under capitalism, and we see this in New York City, and it is such a tragedy, there aren't mental health services available. So what they do is they find ways to criminalize being homeless, and that is unbelievable, right? I mean, they find ways that if you are homeless, they can make it against the law. All over the country, they have this vagrancy laws, they call it. In some places, if you don't have $20 on your person, you can be arrested if you don't have at least $20 on you. And that's absolutely wrong. No, socialism opposes homelessness, right? Socialism is making sure that everyone has a home, and that being a priority of the government. President Xi Jinping, he very famously said that houses are for living in, not for speculation, right? And that under this system, houses are for landlords and bankers to make money. Well, under socialism, houses are constructed for social use. Socialism is production for social use, not production according to profit. Someone asked me to talk about Mother Jones. Mother Jones was a very important labor leader in the history of the United States. She organized a children's crusade of child laborers and factory workers. She was a founder of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World Union, which was a revolutionary labor union. She was involved in miners' struggles that took place in West Virginia and Kentucky and other states. She was a very important labor organizer and agitator. She kind of was skilled at the art of street theater and raising awareness about working people's conditions. She was Irish, an Irish woman, Mother Jones, she was known as. Very, very famous and very important pivotal figure in American labor. Someone asked about Ron Paul voting for the authorization of the use of force. I didn't know that. Hollywood, okay. I didn't know that. But it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Bernie Sanders voted for that as well. Ron Paul, he's a paleoconservative. He's, more critical of interventionism around the world. He's no longer in Congress, but, Ron Paul is, at the same time, I'm not surprised that happened. I don't know for a fact that happened. That's what someone tweeted at me. And I guess the other super chat that someone asked about was the synthetic left. Well, I've talked about that at length. There is an entity walking around that calls itself the left, that rejects historical progress, and that's not the left. It rejects historical progress. It favors chaos and destruction. It's very hostile to average working people, and I don't consider that to be the left. Okay. Now the super chats from tonight. That's all the super chats from the other night. Ecuador elections. Well, look, a neoliberalism came in. When Lenin Moreno came into office, he brought with him neoliberal reforms. Rafael Correa did amazing things for Ecuador, raised so many people out of poverty, did so much construction, really amazing. Labor theory of value. All right, did so much construction. It was really, really amazing. And, raised so many people out of poverty. I went to Ecuador when I was a kid. I've told this story many times. I went to Ecuador when I was a kid. I didn't miss it. I saw Hollywood and labor theory of value. I saw that. I went to Ecuador when I was a kid in 1999 in the middle of the crisis of neoliberalism. And then I went back to Ecuador in 2013. And I saw what the socialist government had accomplished. And it was like night and day. Now, when Lenin Moreno came in, it certainly had a devastating effect. And so now, there is much frustration. Now, there is an ultra-left party in Ecuador, a party of Hojaists, supporters of Enver Hoxha, like hardliners. And they have, historically, they've aligned with like CIA coups and attempted coups in the country. And they're so angry at Rafael Correa. They consider Rafael Correa to not be a true Marxist or socialist. And so based on that, they aligned with the far right wing. But there are also now forces that are aligned with Rafael Correa, that think Lenin Moreno has betrayed the Ecuadorian, Bolivarian socialist revolution that Rafael Correa led. We'll see what happens. We'll have to see what happens. Someone asked, how is the missus? My wife is fine. She's great, feeling much better. Yeah, I mean, so thanks for asking. But she's doing much better. We're spending a lot of time together these days because, look, in New York City, there are two places to go, home and work. I mean, yeah, and she's doing much better. And thanks for everyone who expressed concerns about her health. Her health, we were a little bit nervous yesterday, but it looks like she's okay. Alrighty. Education versus entertainment. Well, I don't think the two are necessarily, are incompatible, right? When to effectively educate, you have to keep people interested, and that requires entertaining them a little bit. To effectively entertain, you have to give people something, right? Effective entertainment, has education. Effective education has entertainment. Now, obviously, the purpose of education is simply to teach, right? Whereas the purpose of entertainment is simply to amuse. So there's a difference between the two. But I feel like what I do on here is a little bit of both. I try to be funny, and I try to, tell you, I try to amuse you, but I also try to educate you. So I think that they walk hand in hand. A good teacher, will entertain you a bit, and a good educator and a good entertainer will educate you a little bit. And I think that the two walk hand in hand. So, but they are two. I mean, they're different aims, right? Entertainment is to amuse. Education is to inform. All right. Works on dialectical logic. There are a lot of very good books. There's actually a very good book that was written by a leader of the Communist Party in the 1940s, and it was called Man Against Myth. Man Against Myth, and it took some beliefs in popular culture, beliefs in popular culture in the United States, and it refuted them. One of those is the belief that thinking makes it so, right? Thinking makes it so. We hear this, that mind over matter, right? Thinking makes it so. That's a big part of American culture. He goes over that. But there are many, many books that use, the dialectical and historical materialist method. You can talk about Mao and On Contradiction. What is, I guess, since this person is using the phrase dialectical logic and all, I don't know what they're getting at. So why don't we talk about what the dialectic is and what it is not, okay? One of the crude distortions you'll hear from critics of Marxism, they will say that dialectics is the belief that change only comes through conflict and violence. That is a crude oversimplification. The dialectic goes back to Hegel. It was Hegel, it goes back even further, right? I mean, you can talk about Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, right, that said you never step into the same river twice. But the philosopher Hegel argued that history was being advanced forward, and that what drove history forward was contradiction. That was when there are things that cannot coexist with each other, ideas that are incompatible with each other, they clash. They contradict each other and they clash. And this clash of ideas is called a dialectic, right? And that there is first a thesis, and the thesis contends with a synthesis, the thesis contends with an antithesis. And the thesis and the antithesis clash, and they create a synthesis. And then the synthesis becomes the new thesis, and there becomes a new antithesis, and they clash, and they produce a new synthesis. And that is how history advances. Hegel saw this primarily in the realm of ideas, right? There was ideas that were clashing. Karl Marx took Hegel's understanding of dialectics and combined it with Greek materialism and the understanding that all that exists in the world is matter. And he took materialism, all that exists that is matter, and combined it with dialectics and said that all that exists is matter, but that matter is constantly in a state of motion and change. And the way Marxists have generally articulated, I've said this many times on these lives, is A does not equal A. A does not equal A, right? This first A can never be the same as the second A. The world is constantly in a state of change. That is the nature of dialectical and historical materialism. Dialectical materialism is A does not equal A. that all that exists in the world is matter, but that matter is constantly in a state of change, and it is through the conflict and the contradictions that those changes happen. Now, historical materialism argues that the advance of human history has come through class struggle, that classes struggling against each other is what brings about historical progress, that is the underlying economic base that is the clash. It's not simply these ideas don't just float down from the sky, that there is an economic underlying component to these ideas, that the ideas of the bourgeoisie that toppled feudalism didn't just come down from the sky. The ideas of the bourgeoisie came from their class position, and the feudal lords and aristocrats, their ideas came from their class position. And the bourgeoisie and the feudal lords clashed because one economic interest was on one side and another economic interest was on another side, and they clashed, and out of that came the modern world and capitalism, right? And that this is dialectics, and that's what the dialectical method is. About the economic calculation problem yesterday, and you didn't get to it. Okay, the economic calculation problem. Problem. Alrighty. And who will win the Super Bowl from a Marxist perspective? Oh boy. Oh boy. I talked a little bit about the Super Bowl earlier. Glad it's on the list. All right. Next question. What about Prince Charles and his Malthusianism? Yeah, the British royal family have always been that you talk about the Eastern establishment. You talk about, this Council on Foreign Relations. You talk about Cecil Rhodes and his Round Table Group, which was kind of the predecessor to the Council on Foreign Relations. There's always been a wing of American capital that has a more managerial perspective and sees the human population is out of control, wants to restrict and stop human progress because human progress they see as an affront to Mother Earth and bringing things out of balance. You talk about Prince Charles and the British royal family. That's where the World Wildlife Federation came from. They have a more or less Malthusian perspective. No doubt about it. But there you go. Okay. How do we break the Trump derangement spell? I think we have to stop pandering to the left. Okay, there's a certain faction of the left that is in that mode, the Trump derangement mode. Oh my God, we got to protect our democracy from evil people who believe in conspiracy theories. We got to get to the masses, ultimately. We got to get to the masses. We have to break. We are not the synthetic left. This notion that what it means to be a Marxist or a leftist is whatever the Democrats are doing, we just do it louder, must end, right? We're not recruiting for the liberals. We're not doing the dirty work of the liberals. We have a different message. We have a different belief system. We advocate something completely different than the liberals. We are not liberals. What liberals and Democrats believe and what we believe, there's no relationship. A lot of people think that, what Democrats believe is kind of moderate and communists believe it really, big. No. We do not believe in just an amped up version of what Democrats believe. If you're a socialist, if you're a Marxist, you are anti-imperialist. You want a whole new system where the banks, factories, and industries are controlled by the people. You want illiberalism. Illiberalism, right? Liberalism is the notion that individualism is the highest good. That's not what Marxists believe. Marxists believe in a collective will and the will of the people, the popular will. That's what they believe. They believe that the working class, the entire working class, has a collective interest, that all of the human race has a collective interest, right? That there is truth in this world and that there are ideologies that contend with each other, right? We are not liberals. We are not liberals. We have a completely different view. And we have to just get away from the liberals right now, because right now the liberals are the most toxic. I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday. Shout out to you if you're watching. We had a nice chat around the streets of New York, and we were talking about Trump supporters and how to engage with Trump supporters, the different kinds of Trump supporters out there. It was a great conversation. And that, no, this idea that we are somehow attached to liberals and Democrats, wrong. And we need to get rid of that and get to the masses. What do I think about Tom Brady buying a yacht? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what about it. I know that people have been mad that Tom Brady is a Trump supporter, and I could care less that he's a Trump supporter. I mean, he's a football player. I mean, I mean, look, Colin Kaepernick should have had the freedom to do what he did, and they should never have punished Colin Kaepernick for what he did, and they shouldn't have. I mean, Tom Brady. What people have their political views. I mean, yeah, I mean, I will say there's a lot of, the military and the Pentagon have really inserted themselves into sports. They've really inserted themselves into sports. Look, I remember the first Super Bowl they had after 9/11, and I was watching it, and it was so like ridiculous. They said of all events in history, this will be the one sporting event that has brought a nation together the most. And I'm thinking like, what? Like, I mean, and there's so much the advertising of the Super Bowl, lots of military advertising and lots of, I mean, yeah. So, there you go. There you go. There you go. Alrighty. Oh, I don't know. I can share this with you since people want to talk about the Super Bowl a little bit. There's also the Super Bowl on here, right? So this is your Super Bowl answer, right? The Super Bowl advertisements are important, right? If you want to track trends among the population, the Super Bowl advertisements are important to pay attention to. And the Super Bowl halftime show is actually worth paying attention to because, look, a couple years ago, there was, Black Panther uniforms that were worn in the Super Bowl halftime show. That was a big deal. And it showed that a section of the ruling class was really supporting Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. And that was important. Right. And that was a very, very important development when that happened. Where did the Super Bowl halftime show come from? Right. I mean, where did it come from? Well, for a while, the Super Bowl actually just had like high school marching bands play the halftime show. I mean, it was not a big deal. It wasn't really until I think the late 70s, and this is very bizarre. This is a very strange story. It's a weird rabbit hole. Sometimes I have too much time on my hands. And so I go down these weird rabbit holes. But where did the modern Super Bowl halftime show come from? Well, it came from the fact that, after it was just they had marching bands, high school marching bands performing, and they didn't even show it on TV. They just showed commercials. But then in the late 70s, there was a strange, kind of anti-racist, kind of religious, kind of progressive, kind of conservative, not quite clear where to put them, singing group that was touring the United States. And they were called Up With People. And it was a kind of a strange musical theater singing group. And they were going around promoting these kind of vaguely anti-racist, vaguely liberal, but also vaguely religious things. And so they decided to let them start singing at the halftime shows. And for like 4 or 5 years in a row, and like up into the early 80s, they decided that instead of just showing a commercial during the Super Bowl halftime show, that they would show the singers from Up With People. Trump was just part of a psyop leading to a nationalist capitalist outsider elite uprising. Trump as a psyop. All right. And what's weird is that the people that they had doing the Super Bowl halftime show, this Up With People singing group, even more bizarre, they were part of a strange British intelligence operation called moral rearmament. Okay, you can Google this, moral rearmament, and before that it was called the Oxford Group. And basically what it was is in Britain, when it became clear that Britain and Britain and Germany were going to go to war, in Britain they had a big problem, a very, very big problem, which was that most British conservatives kind of had a good opinion of the Nazis, right? The British royal family, King Edward had to step down because he was an admirer of the Nazis. And, and it was a big problem. And that on the left, you had the communists and the labor unions, but among a lot of British conservatives, among a lot of stodgy British, conservatives, Tories, religious folks, they thought Hitler wasn't so bad. So in Britain, there was this minister, I actually forget his name, and he was from the United States, but they set him up, and he started something called the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group was this, what do you want to, a cult, a religious movement? I don't know what it was, but it was for young men. It reminds you of like Jordan Peterson. And it was actually very similar to what the fascist Oswald Mosley was doing, right? Oswald Mosley, the fascist, he provided housing for, supporters of Oswald Mosley, and he built, his, what they called them, the black shirt brigades, right? And he had this like discipline program for young men to become black shirt street fighters or whatever. So, to counter Oswald Mosley and to try and build up support for a war against Germany in Britain, British intelligence set up the Oxford Group. And it was this like young men's training program. And you couldn't drink alcohol, and you had to be, chaste, and you couldn't have sex until you got married. And they exercised together, and they were super religious and super Christian, but they wanted to unify all world's religions. They wanted to unify all world's religions. That was a big point. It was very strange. It was like a Christian group, but they argued that somehow Christianity was manifest in Islam, and they adopted like the 5 principles of Buddhism were like their beliefs, which were like kind of plagiarized from Buddhism. It was a very strange thing. But among British conservatives, they set up this thing called the Oxford Group. And eventually, as they were rearming, they had rearmament as their, war production is, they're building weapons of war and they're building to World War II. They changed the name of the Oxford Group to the Moral Rearmament. And they put this pastor all over British television preaching the moral rearmament, that Britain, not only did they need to rearm with guns, but they needed a moral rearmament, right? And that they were going to become more, and it was to get conservatives who might sympathize with the Nazis or might sympathize with Oswald Mosley, the fascist in Britain, to support the war effort. It was a British intelligence operation, basically. And after World War II, of course, they become very, very, anti-communist because they're following British and American intelligence. And they're in the United States, and they're McCarthyists, and they're wild McCarthyists. And, they didn't like the 1960s. They didn't like the 1960s and the, Vietnam War protesting and stuff. So they started this Up With People singing group, which was this, like, traveling singing group that would, like, kind of, they were against racism and they were against violence, and they wanted people to get along, but they were also kind of against hippies and kind of against counterculture and kind of against communists. And it was this bizarre formation. And they picked these people, this singing group started by Moral Rearmament. They picked them to start doing the Super Bowl halftime shows. Okay, so forgive me, that's a very bizarre tangent I just took you on. That is where the Super Bowl halftime shows came from. For a while, it was just marching bands. Then they decided to have the Moral Rearmament Up With People group perform at the halftime shows. And the Moral Rearmament people, they would sing like pop songs from the 1950s, and they would sing like, kind of vaguely anti-racist songs, What Color Is God, and stuff like that. And it was like an effort to try to like kind of put out kind of a vaguely anti-communist, vaguely religious, vaguely conservative, but also vaguely liberal. It was a weird thing. And intelligence agencies are strange. A lot of what the CIA and a lot of what British intelligence do is try to manage public opinion and try to like nudge. There's actually a book, Cass Sunstein, who worked in the Obama White House, the husband of Samantha Power. He wrote a book about conspiracy theories, which is all about how we can control conspiracy theories. He also wrote a book called Nudge. And basically, in that book, what he says basically is what the intelligence apparatus does. A lot of times is they are just trying to subtly nudge the U.S. public in one way or another. Said that Trump's last act was to put Israel part of a central command. Okay, whatever. They kind of nudge the public in a certain way. So they had this strange, effort to get conservatives to oppose the Nazis and support World War II that eventually morphed into some weird anti-communist group that eventually morphed into this strange singing group that became the Super Bowl halftime show. That is a really strange history and development. And now the Super Bowl halftime show, it's just whoever the local pop star, whoever the latest, most famous people are. Who's doing the Super Bowl halftime show this year? I don't even know, right? I really don't even know. But, it's whoever's popular, in popular music. Britney Spears was doing it when I was a kid, I think, in sync, or, whatever the kids are into these days. I sound like an old man, don't I? I'm only 33. What the hell? But yeah, that's actually where it came from. One interesting thing is that this Oxford group in Britain, that's where Alcoholics Anonymous comes from. Interestingly, the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous were part of Oxford group also. So it's weird. You wouldn't know about the Oxford group. You wouldn't know about moral rearmament. I just, recently started reading about them, and I had no idea. But this was an intelligence operation in the lead up to World War II. British intelligence decided that, yeah, and out of that we get Alcoholics Anonymous, and out of that the two founders of Alcoholics Anonymous were both members of the Oxford group. And they had turned to the Oxford group apparently because it didn't allow you to drink. You weren't allowed to drink if you were part of the Oxford group, and they both struggled with their drinking. And so they joined the Oxford group, and eventually they broke away from the Oxford group and started Alcoholics Anonymous, or FLQ Marxists. I don't know what FLQ is. So that's where the Super Bowl halftime show says. So that I have said more about the Super Bowl than a non-sports like guy ever says. So there you go. All right. Next question. What do I think about the People's Party? What do I think about the People's Party? The People's Party is it's a new formation. Cornel West, and who is it? Cornel West and Jimmy Dore and others, they formed a People's Party. And let's see what develops out of it. There have been many declarations to break with the Democratic Party before that haven't really gone anywhere. In the 90s, there was an attempt to form a Labor Party of the United States, and nothing happened. In New York State, we have what's called the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party. And the Working Families Party is an organization that they're on the ballot in the state of New York. They're on the ballot, but they just give their ballot line to the Democrats. It's like another ballot line for the Democrats, but it's like set up by the labor unions. So, but let's see if the People's Party, they run candidates against the Democrats, they win some seats. That would be quite a development. I think Nina Turner is on board with them. She was an important leader of the Bernie Sanders movement. So let's see. Free speech in socialist countries. Well, look, I think that we can admit that in some cases, the socialist countries are not where they need to be in terms of freedom of speech. There's no reason to just blindly defend everything they've ever done. But it's also important to point out the circumstances that they're in. That we in the West, we have a very stable society, a very prosperous society. When 15 countries invade Russia after the Soviet Union, when Cuba is facing sanctions and all kinds of threats, it's a different situation. Tucker hosting anti-imperialists is ultimately good, but it has its own agenda. I say it contradicts his normal, as neocon father Dick was the longest director of Voice of America. All right, very good. I'm not Tucker Carlson's pal. He doesn't have me over to hang out with him. I've never been on his show, so I can understand, your concern there. All right. Would CPI be reaching out to workers' movements or international movements? Absolutely, right? Now, to be clear, CPI is an educational organization. It is not an activist group, right? We're not engaging in activism, right? There's not maybe, we're not campaigning for people. We're not organizing protests and demonstrations. It's about engaging in outreach and building socialist educational events. That's what it's about. But, I'm already in touch with people all over the world have reached out to me already. In many different countries, I've already been in touch with people. And we haven't even really kicked off except for the web conferences, and already we're engaging with so many different people. So there you go. Biden ending the war in Yemen. Well, I spoke about that at the beginning. It seems to me like Biden has realized that the Yemeni people will not surrender. The Yemeni people will not surrender. And because of that, because the Yemeni people will not surrender, that he's going to have to negotiate with them to some degree. And that's why he lifted the terrorism restriction. But ultimately, I don't know. What does he want to do? Is he going to try to divide up Yemen with some kind of peace deal? The Yemeni people will not surrender. All right. China-based Western YouTubers have had a big impact. Great. Nathan Rich is great. I love his stuff. And there's others that are out there. And we need to refute these lies against China. We need to refute these lies because there's a lot of just efforts to just demonize China so much. Look, there are, beyond, let's step back and pretend this isn't just about China. There are two sides to every story. right? But the way American media reports on anything related to China, there's not two sides to it. No, no, no. China bad, China evil, China violate human rights. America just want freedom. Come on now, right? And so, challenging that narrative is important. What China has achieved is amazing. What China and socialism have achieved is utterly amazing. And you can't deny their achievements and what China is doing around the world with the Belt and Road. The way China was able to, their economy has just bounced back from the pandemic because it's so well organized, and yeah, there you go. And the UK ban on CGTN is completely unacceptable. Alrighty, cool. What is the difference between a Marxist and a socialist? Very good questions. Have you ever read The Naked Communist? No, I haven't. What is the difference between a Marxist and a socialist? Well, a Marxist is an adherent of the theories of Karl Marx, of scientific socialism, of dialectical and historical materialism. Socialism long predates Marx. The first person to use the word socialism was Henry Saint-Simon in France, and he was kind of a utopian thinker. He built some worker cooperatives. He tried to organize for protections of worker on the job. He engaged in charity and would feed the poor and such. And he used the word socialism with an E on the end of it in French, and he didn't see it as opposed to capitalism. The word capitalism wasn't really around yet. He saw it as opposed to liberalism, right? In the French Revolution, their ideology was liberalism. And Henry Saint-Simon said that they needed to counter liberalism with socialism, and he didn't exactly explain what it was. Now, the first person to use the word socialism in English was Robert Owen. Robert Owen was Welsh. He was a Welsh factory owner, very wealthy man, but he saw that capitalism was bad, and so he built cooperative cities. He built New Lanark, which was a colony in Scotland that was like a socialist colony, and eventually he moved to the United States, and he built New Harmony in Indiana, which is a socialist, commune or cooperative city in Indiana. Robert Owen was invited to give a speech to a joint session of the U.S. Congress. But the difference between Marx and all these other socialists was that all of these people made moralistic appeals for socialism. They said socialism is better because it's right, because it's fair. Marx argued that socialism was the natural progression of history and that it was the result of the class struggle, and that socialism wouldn't arise by someone building a model city or a model community. It would arise by the working class rising up and seizing control of the means of production. Marxism is the scientific form of socialism. The previous forms of socialism were utopian. And so that's the difference. And one can be a socialist and not a Marxist, right? One can advocate a non-capitalist society and not accept Marxist theories. But if one accepts Marxist theories, one would come to the conclusion that the working class should rise up and seize control of the means of production. That's the difference. All right, what do I think of Hollywood? Look, Hollywood represents the U.S. capitalist class. It's very tied in with the military-industrial complex, very tied in with the Pentagon. But at the same time, it's Hollywood liberals, right? They tend to represent the more liberal wing. Hollywood was very pro-Roosevelt. In the 1930s, in the United States, all the factory owners and a lot of the wealthy capitalists hated Roosevelt. But Hollywood, they were with that more liberal Rockefeller wing that liked Roosevelt. And that's important. It's important to note that. That Hollywood, and that the other thing is that Hollywood, they tend to glorify wealth, and they tend to push like a kind of a glorification of wealth. And, many people have said there's kind of a greed in Hollywood, but they also tend to be more socially liberal. I mean, Hollywood was for gay rights before most of the United States was, and that, Hollywood, has, they're more socially liberal. Hollywood, though, the amount of influence that the American government has, whether it's the Pentagon directly sponsoring movies, whether it's the fact that during the 1960s there was a CIA asset on the board of every major studio. I know that sounds tinfoil hatty, but you read the book Finks by the book Finks, which is about how the CIA tricked the world's greatest writers. They talk about how in every Hollywood studio there was a CIA asset on the board of directors, and they would censor films to be in line with U.S. foreign policy goals, and that Hollywood is very, very much, it is about making money, okay? At the end of the day, they want to make money from their movies, okay? But at the same time, Hollywood has arrangements with the government. The government allows them to, use their equipment for their war movies and such, and so they have a relationship. Okay, well, whatever, man. I don't, whatever. All right. Whatever, man. And there you go. The labor theory of value, does it apply in socialist countries? Well, in socialist countries, when they have a market sector, it most certainly applies. Yeah, I mean, if, the worker is selling his labor power to a capitalist. And, I mean, the difference between capitalism and socialism, let's be clear, is different than, there's the difference between capitalism and socialism, and then there's communism. Capitalism is a system where the banks, factories, and industries are operated according to profit, to what is profitable. Socialism is when the banks, factories, and industries operate according to what is best for society. Now, there is a market sector in socialist societies, often, not always, but often. And so in that market sector, yeah, the worker is going to sell his labor, and that capitalist is going to derive surplus value from it. However, the capitalist will have a state that is loyal to the population, controlling the efforts of that capitalist. And the capitalist won't be free to just do what he wants in the market sector. The state sector, obviously, will be functioning according to the state central plan, and that there's not, it's not a for-profit enterprise in the state sector. So that's the difference. Communism, the higher stage of communism, is a world with vast material abundance, from each according to his own ability to each according to his need. It's a world where people can just work because they feel like working. It's a world where there's no division between mental and manual labor. If you read The Critique of the Goethe Program by Karl Marx, he explains what communism, the higher stage of communism, is. That's a world based on vast material abundance, in which inequality fades away because inequality is rooted in scarcity, right? If there is so much abundance in society, there's no need to hoard anything, okay? So there you go. Alrighty, next question. The economic calculation problem. Well, look, this is an old canard, right? That, no government could ever possibly calculate exactly how much of stuff we need, so therefore socialism doesn't work. Well, Walmart, they use computer programs, and they centrally plan and calculate how much each store needs, right? They centrally plan. Amazon, they centrally plan exactly how much they need to put in every warehouse. It's a little bit of a non sequitur. Now, to some degree or other, I argue, that you'd probably need a market sector in a socialist society for things like consumer goods. For like restaurants and hotels, it's better to have worker cooperatives for your market things, so no one's exploiting anyone else's labor. But as far as the economic calculation problem, the idea that in the Soviet Union, no, they couldn't figure out how much steel to produce because they didn't have a problem with that. In the Soviet Union, they knew how much steel they needed, and they produced it, right? In the Soviet Union, it's a little bit of an overblown thing. It's a little bit of an overblown thing. If you look at the capitalist monopolies, they're able to calculate how much they need for things. They just calculate it and centrally plan based on their profits. Well, we'll centrally plan based on what's good for society. Donald Trump was a psyop. I don't think so. I think there are big divisions in the U.S. ruling class. I think that Donald Trump very much did try to manage his supporters, and did try to push certain ideas on them. But I think there are divisions in the ruling class. Clearly, they're not all together. The idea they're all in this together. No, that's not materialism at that point. Are there any ancient philosophers you think should read Marx? Ancient or medieval philosophers who should read Marx? Well, Marx was around in the 1800s, so it'd be very hard for these ancient or medieval philosophers to read him. Heraclitus would be blown away, I think, by reading Marx. He would be blown away by it because he would see the influence that he had, but he would see his ideas greatly expanded. I think Socrates would also be impressed with Marx. Plato. Many people read Plato's Republic as kind of proto utopian. What's this? Not the question. What is this? All right. Okay. So there you go. But yeah, are there any ancient or medieval philosophers you think Marxists should read? Marxists should read. Okay, that was the question. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think, first of all, I think that probably my favorite work of of ancient philosophy is the Phaedo by Socrates. If you read the Plato's account of the death of Socrates, Plato's Phaedo, where Socrates is dying and he's telling his philosophers about what it means to be a philosopher, about the soul versus the body, about the I mean that stuff is amazing, right? And you really understand how amazing Socrates really was when you read the Phaedo. I recommend the Phaedo. I think every person who is struggling with these ideas, struggling to be a better person, struggling with Marxism and what it means, they should read the Phaedo. Now, I also recommend, Heraclitus. He only had like sayings, right? It was like there's not much of Heraclitus available, but Heraclitus, I mean, he was definitely a big influence. You know, what else? Honestly, I don't ever want to read Plato's Republic again. When I was in college, every class I took, and we're going to read Plato's Republic again. Very good. Mine too, says Red Illuminati. What is mine? Oh, it's your favorite. Oh, okay, good. Glad to hear that, Red Illuminati. I'm glad that I'm not the only one. I also, I mean, I think it would be important, if you want to understand the foundations of Western thought, it would be important to revisit like the City of God, and understand St. Augustine and his ideas. I think that, laid the foundations for a lot of European thought. I think it's also important to understand, and I've reflected in a lot of my writing on the divide between the Stoicists and the hedonists in Rome, and the flaws of both of them, right? That a lot of people think of the hedonists, yeah, they're disgusting hedonists, but the Stoicists were this pure, and that the Stoicism is still alive, like Roman Stoicism, the cult of Mithras, and the cults that developed in the city of Rome. The Stoic Romans were very problematic and reactionary in their own way. So it's important to know, why was the philosopher Seneca of ancient Rome, why was he wrong? I think it's important to know about that. So I see folks are saying goodnight, and I'm probably saying goodnight now too. It's been fun. It's been a fun one. So thank you, everybody. I'll be back soon, as you all are aware. Always fun to engage with all of you. So I hope you all have a good Saturday night and a good Sunday. I might be back on tomorrow, might not be. But yeah, I'll just wrap it up here. So a new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. Thanks.